She rescued a drowning man months later. He surprised everyone as a mafia boss who claimed her. The sun hung high in the sky as Sarah leaned back on her towel, taking a rare moment of peace by the lakeside. In her early 30s, she poured her heart into working night shifts at the community hospital, where her tireless devotion to helping others defined her life. But the weight of her family's expectations loomed overhead like a cloud. They had always envisioned her settling down, starting a family of her own. As the murmur of water lapping at the shore soothed her, thoughts of their disappointment crept into her mind, undermining her solace. An unexpected scream broke through her reverie. "Help! Someone's drowning!" Instinctively, Sarah shot up, and her heart raced. Without thinking, she plunged into the water. The coolness was shocking, but urgency propelled her forward. She found him, a muscular man with dark hair thrashing against the waves. She didn't know who he was, but he was in trouble. In a matter of moments, she reached him, grabbing his arm and pulling him closer. He gasped for air, confusion clouding his eyes, but he didn't resist. Somehow, she brought him back to the surface, their lives forever intertwined that day. A few weeks later, while dutifully attending to her patients, she met Marco again. He was healing but also carrying the weight of shadows from his past. As he opened up to her, Sarah learned about the dangerous world he was entangled in. The Mafia. She felt a mixture of empathy and fear. Could she love a man with such a bleak background? The prospect sent shivers down her spine. How could she reconcile her devotion to her profession with the invisible lines drawn by society? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, their bond bloomed amidst stolen moments of laughter and the weight of impending dangers. Yet every tender hug and shared smile tugged at the layers of guilt surrounding her. Was she betraying her family? Her town? Her role as a nurse? Anxiety coiled tightly in her chest every time she considered Marco's presence in her life. She was terrified of getting swept into his chaos, but equally terrified of losing the warmth he had brought to her otherwise regimented world. Just when she thought she might confront her fears, news erupted, rattling everything she thought she understood. Marco had risen through the ranks of a crime syndicate and sat at the top now as a boss. Unease poured into the town like a thick fog, whispers of danger laced penetrating her everyday routine. The loyal nurse, whose heart had been stirred by a drowning man, now grappled with love that could jeopardize her values and profession. Now, standing on the precipice of two worlds, Marco appeared, the conflict of their lives colliding faster than her heart could synchronize. He reached for her, eyes demanding trust. The ground beneath her felt unsteady. Was it loyalty she dared to choose or the safety of her community? As terror rooted in her thoughts, she swallowed hard, knowing a decision waited to be made that would alter everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the turbulent lake, Sarah stood paralyzed by uncertainty. Marco's eyes held an intensity that pulled her in, offering both a promise of excitement and a threat she couldn't ignore. This moment, suspended in time, felt portentous. The warmth she once sought from this connection felt dangerously intertwined with the chill of fear. Adrenaline surged as she wrestled with her emotions. Could she really trust a man who had climbed to the top of a criminal organization? The repercussions of her choices loomed large, lurking like shadows waiting to engulf her. In the hospital, she had always been the healer, the person everyone relied on. But now, her own heart clawed under the weight of conflicting realities. "Sarah," Marco's voice cut through the thick air, breaking the spell. "You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not the monster you think I am." The sincerity in his eyes softened the sharp edges of her fear, but the gnawing doubt remained. Could she take him at his word when the world around them screamed otherwise? in her turmoil, a realization struck. This was not just about him, it was about who she was becoming. Each interaction with Marco siphoned away the barriers she had meticulously constructed around her life, the nurse, the protector of morals. With Marco, she was confronted by chaos, yet she felt an intoxicating pull towards the unknown. Ready to confront her feelings, she introduced a new strategy to her internal monologue. It wasn't merely about indulging in the warmth of his presence or cowering under guilt. It was about exploration. What could emerge if she allowed herself space to discover the truth of their connection free from bias? "Let us go for a walk," she suggested, needing to escape the weight of the moment. Marco nodded, and they meandered along the shore, the gentle lapping of the water an unwelcome reminder of the drowning incident that had bound them. As they moved away from prying eyes, an unanticipated layer of vulnerability unveiled itself. "Tell me why you've chosen this life," she urged, navigating the fine line between curiosity and caution. Marco hesitated, anguish shadowing his features. "Survival, Sarah. It was never my intent to become what I am now, but sometimes the cards you're dealt push you down paths you never wanted to tread." The admission hung between them like a tangible presence a risk revealed. His unveiling ignited a spark of determination within her. She wouldn't shy away from the complexity of his existence but confront it head-on. Threads of understanding began weaving their disparate lives together, with each step forward, her resolve solidified, but the enchantment was quicksilver, fear still thrummed beneath the surface. What about her family's expectations? Would they ever accept him? Internal conflict churned relentlessly, intertwining with new insights about herself. Freedom and obligation warred within, demanding clarity. As the sun began to set, a gust of wind swept through, chilling her resolve. "I need to figure out my priorities," Sarah breathed, realization washing over her. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. "Be careful, Sarah," Marco warned, an undertone of urgency weaving through his voice. "My world doesn't take kindly to outsiders, especially those who get too close." His possessiveness sparked unease. "Are you saying I should step back?" she questioned, the weight of his power surging ominously between them. Silence enveloped them as dusk fell, their future uncertain, tension escalating with every heartbeat. Both yearning and fear clashed, forcing Sarah to confront what waited at the edge of her decisions. The time had come to face whether love could triumph over the dark legacy surrounding Marco. Could she transcend the limits imposed by expectation and her own fears? As she stood on the brink, unable to predict the alignment of their fates, one question lingered: was she courageous enough to embrace a future woven with shadows alongside him? The following morning, Sarah awoke with a sense of displacement. The sun streamed through her window, yet the warmth felt foreign, a stark contrast to the turmoil wrestling inside her. She dressed mechanically, her mind preoccupied with the conversation from the night before. Fear pricked at the edges of her consciousness. What had she awakened in herself by stepping closer to Marco's chaotic world? At the hospital, the sterile scent of antiseptic greeted her, but today even that failed to ground her. She moved through her rounds like a ghost, offering reassurances to patients, but internally she was grappling with the decisions that lay before her. Each softly uttered directive about healing felt like an echo, a reminder that her own heart was still fraught with conflict. During lunch, she found herself seated with colleagues who unknowingly acted as a sounding board for her internal struggles. "You seem distracted, Sarah," noted Linda, the head nurse, as she stirred her coffee, skepticism lacing her tone. "Everything all right?" The question forced Sarah to draw a deep breath. Should she confide, even partially, in someone who could never understand the scope of her turmoil? "Just a lot on my mind," she replied, the words tasting like sand on her tongue. She yearned to be seen, to unravel the complexities of Marco without judgment, yet she buried that urge under layers of professionalism. During a brief lull in the chaos of the emergency room, Sarah leaned against the supply cabinet, allowing herself a moment of reflection. Each passing second added weight to her burden. She could visualize Marco's burden etched in the furrows of his brow. His life, dictated by survival, mirrored an instinct she felt straining within herself, a primal need to overcome. As the clock ticked on, she decided that she couldn't just stand outside Marco's world, peering in through the veil of fear. The revelations about herself were blossoming, and she couldn't let them wither under doubt. She approached Dr. Richards with a proposed idea for a community outreach program that focused on rehabilitation and prevention of addiction, a response to the growing problem in their district. "We could create a system where we not only help those suffering but also educate families," she asserted, her heart racing with unexpected excitement. Dr. Richards raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet cautious. "That's an ambitious proposal, Sarah. Are you prepared for the challenges ahead? Resources are limited." "I am ready," she insisted, feeling the fire of her convictions ignite inside. This was about reclaiming her narrative, not just for her patients but for herself. If she could guide others through their pain, perhaps she could navigate her own. As she returned home later that evening, every ounce of courage she had summoned propelled her into a concrete decision. Marco's world, with its shadows, no longer felt insurmountable. With clarity blossoming, she made a plan. She would confront him, push deeper into the labyrinth of his life, understanding that embracing complexity both in him and within herself could lead to growth. That night, as she replayed their encounters during a restless sleep, her mind swirled with the potential convergence of their paths. Tomorrow, she would gather her strength and reach out to Marco not just as a healer, but as an equal. Unbeknownst to her, each moment of preparation drew them closer to an inevitable confrontation, one that would lay bare the consequences of their choices. And as she readied herself, another thought crept in: what if, while navigating his chaos, she awakened something far more dangerous than love? As dawn broke, uncertainty curled its fingers around her resolve once more. Would she be able to face the truth behind Marco's life, or would her quest for understanding uncover deeper, darker secrets that could shatter what little stability she had left? As the sun rose higher, casting an uneven light across her small apartment, Sarah felt a sense of urgency knotting her stomach. The day ahead loomed large. She was no longer just a nurse, she had become an architect of her own destiny, fraught with potential and peril. Her pulse quickened as she rehearsed her approach to Marco in her mind. At the hospital, the usual cadence of her rounds offered little solace. The rhythmic beeping of machines and the murmurs of recovery seemed to fade into a distant hum as she navigated the floors with a singular focus. Her thoughts gravitated toward the encounter she was about to initiate. "Hey, Sarah," called a familiar voice, pulling her from her reverie. It was Chris, a fellow nurse with a penchant for overpacking his lunch. "You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." "Just a busy day ahead," she replied, forcing a smile. But her heart raced differently now. A mix of apprehension and resolute determination coursed through her. The battle inside her mind raged on. She was torn between professionalism and the tumultuous depths of personal investment. After her shift, she found a quiet moment in the break room, clutching her half-cold coffee. It was what Marco often described as a moment of clarity, a pause where choices crystallized. In the solace, Sarah questioned her motives. Was she chasing the thrill of the unknown, or was this a genuine attempt to save him from himself? Each possibility unfolded like origami in her brain, layer upon layer. That evening, armed with her resolve, she drove to a part of town that felt foreign and intimidating. The streets appeared more vibrant than she remembered. Their vibrancy felt dangerous, corrupt, almost alive in a way that clamored for attention. Her heart thundered as she parked, every instinct screaming to turn back. But she forced herself to step out of the car, inhaling deep breaths of the night air, grounding herself against the undercurrent of fear. Navigating the familiar alleyways, Sarah found herself at the entrance of Marco's world. She could hear laughter, muffled shouts, and the distant echo of music. A hybrid of terror and courage surged within her as she contemplated how she would approach him, what words would bridge their disparate realities. The door swung open and a wave of noise surged out, drawing her in. Inside, the atmosphere crackled, a sensory overload of life, laughter, and something darker simmering beneath the surface. Marco stood at the center, flanked by friends, his demeanor confident yet impossibly vulnerable. Their eyes met, and in that instant, everything she had rehearsed vaporized. The gravity of his struggles anchored her feet to the floor. "Sarah," he said, his expression morphing from surprise to something more complex, curiosity stirred with wariness. "I came to talk," her voice was steady, though her insides felt uncharacteristically unmoored. "About you. About us." He raised an eyebrow, the corners of his mouth playing with a half-smirk. "You really want to wade through this chaos?" His challenge hung in the air, and she sensed the depth of the invitation hidden within. The thrill of confrontation, coupled with the stakes of mutual vulnerability, brought clarity to her chaotic thoughts. She could feel the echoes of their prior exchanges reverberating in her bones. They had both danced around the truth for too long. "I want to understand," she insisted, pushing through the anxiety wrapping around her chest. "Not just the surface, Marco. I want to know why you choose this life, and I need to know if you believe you can still choose otherwise." He studied her intently, the chaos around them eclipsed by their connection. Suddenly, she realized the gravity of her pursuit. Was she prepared for the truth behind the facade? What would it reveal about his world and her role in it? As he opened his mouth to respond, the door behind them burst open, sending a shockwave through the room. A group of unfamiliar faces strode in, tension shifting palpably. Marco's demeanor changed instantaneously, a flicker of fear slipping into his eyes. In that moment, Sarah became acutely aware of how deeply she had plunged into his chaotic world, unaware of the dangerous games in play. Would the truths uncovered lead to healing or destruction? The dynamic between them was about to shift irrevocably, and Sarah braced herself as the edges of their reality began to fray. The chaos erupted around them like a storm, the late-night revelry transformed into a charged silence as individuals clustered together, eyes darting between Sarah and Marco. As the unfamiliar group advanced, their intentions shrouded in ambiguity, Sarah felt the weight of her situation pressing in on her, stranded in a world she had unintentionally entered, enveloped by forces that made her skin crawl. Marco instinctively stepped into her line of vision, his presence both a shield and a window into the deeper turmoil that lay within. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone clipped, defensive. The casual bravado he had emitted moments before evaporated into resolve, a visible shift that nearly took her breath away. "Nothing, just came for a drink," one of the men replied, skepticism lacing his voice. "But we'll have a look around, one Tiwi." Sarah fought to keep her composure as her instincts screamed at her to retreat. Had her resolve been foolish? Why had she not considered the consequences of stepping into Marco's world? Marco caught her eye, the unspoken words sparking a connection, a reminder of their shared history, the warmth of laughter and quiet understanding that once defined them. "Just stay close," he murmured, peeling his gaze back to the men who seemed to relish the disarray they had injected into the room. Through the pulsating crowd, Sarah could feel the intensity of the moment. But the tremors within her grew hotter, igniting a fierce determination. If there was a chance to understand Marco, to help him navigate this treacherous life, she could not let fear dictate her actions. "Marco, let us get out of here," she said, her voice steady enough to cut through the thick tension. The crowd shifted slightly as she approached, fierce determination infused in her words as she took a bold step forward. "You don't have to do this. You can still choose." His eyes widened, a mix of surprise and admiration playing across his features. It was a moment of stark realization. She was trying to remind him of the person he once was, the person he had lost along the way. For a heartbeat, the chaos around them melted away, reducing the noise to nothing more than whispers, with only her heartbeat echoing in her ears. "What do you care?" His words were sharp, a deflection of the vulnerability seeping through. "I'm fine here. Are you?" She pressed, her blood rushing as clarity surged through her. "Look at you, this isn't the Marco I know. You don't have to hide behind this facade anymore." As the strangers closed in, the atmosphere felt charged and volatile, and she began to sense the uncharted territory they tread together. Was it naive to believe she could pull him back, that he could shed these layers he wrapped around himself for protection? Or was it her fear of confrontation pushing her closer to this unpredictable edge? Suddenly, Marco's face shifted, the familiar glint of defiance returning. "You don't get it, Sarah. This is my life now. I can manage just fine," he insisted, tension coiling tightly in the air between them. "I want to help you," she argued, her voice breaking slightly as the fight within her grew. "But I can't do that if you refuse to let me in." The confrontation hung like a taut string between them, revealing the truth they both desperately sought to articulate. Her heart raced as Marco's expression softened momentarily, a glimpse into the man he could be beneath the bravado, but then, a din erupted from the newcomers, snapping him back to attention. The larger man moved forward, a smirk plastered on his face as he pointed toward Sarah. "What is this? A new recruit?" His condescending tone made her shudder, but she drew strength from Marco, determined not to waver. She could see Marco weighing the implications of their moment. Would he rise to defend her, to embrace the connection that threatened to expose his vulnerabilities? Or would he retreat once again, choosing the perilous comfort of the life he had built? Just then, the atmosphere became electric, Marco's resolve hardening into something Sarah had not anticipated, an unwavering commitment to protect what they could still salvage. Perhaps, beneath the layers of chaos, there was still a fragment of hope. The moment hung precariously, suspended in the air like a blade on the brink of revelation. And as she met his eyes once more, she felt the world tilt beneath their shared tension, acrid and intoxicating. With the strangers closing in, Sarah braced for the collision of their realities, unprepared for the choices that lay ahead. What choice would Marco make? Everything hung in the balance as the larger man's smirk broadened, drawing attention to the confrontation brewing just beneath the surface. Marco's stance was firm, but Sarah could sense the wavering resolve behind his steel facade. They were both teetering on the precipice of something monumental, and she felt an unyielding desperation to anchor him back to a truth he had almost forgotten. "Stay back," Marco's voice emerged, low and gravelly, though doubt seeped through the cracks. "This doesn't involve you." He was trying to push the intruders away, but it was more than just a defensive maneuver. It was a plea, barely veiled, reflecting the tangled mess of uncertainty within himself. "Why do you think it doesn't?" Sarah countered, stepping closer to him. The men narrowed their eyes, their attention pivoting from Marco's bravado back to her, and she felt the weight of their judgment. "You can't handle this alone, Marco. And you know it." She spoke with the urgency of someone who had fought these battles in her own heart. His gaze flickered, a flicker of the vulnerability he was striving to hide. The large man's laughter cut through the intensity, shattering their moment of connection. "Look at this, an emotional rescue mission in the middle of a bar." He stepped forward, invading their space, and Sarah braced herself, ready to confront whatever was coming. "Walk away," Marco asserted, a little less convincing now, but still standing ground. Yet something deep inside told her this was not about the confrontation unfolding before them but rather the turmoil within Marco himself. His past loomed like a shadow, threatening to swallow any light she tried to bring into his life. Sarah took a breath, grounding herself in her determination. "You need to let me in," she implored, her voice pitching higher as the stakes rose. "You used to trust me. Let me help you fight this." "Fight what?" Marco shot back, frustration etched in his features. "This is my life now. You don't know what I'm up against." But even as he said it, she could see the fraying edges of his bravado. "I don't need to know everything," she replied, firm yet gentle. "I just need you to see that you don't have to be alone in this." A flicker of compassion flashed in his eyes, maybe a chink in the armor he had crafted so meticulously around himself. The larger man scoffed, the tension thickening as the other intruders closed in. Marco's gaze darted between Sarah and the intimidating group before them, and she knew this was the moment of truth. Could he bridge the chasm that had formed between their past and this treacherous present? "Marco, you still have a choice," she urged, searching for any hint of recognition, any sign that the man she once knew still lived within this new identity he had adopted. "Don't shut me out. We can do this." In that moment, his expression morphed, the wall he had built began to tremble, a decision wavering precariously at his fingertips. But before he could respond, the large man lunged forward, causing Marco to instinctively move to protect Sarah. She could feel the energy shift, the steadying resolve morphing into something else entirely. Let us see just how you handle yourself, tough guy, the men sneered, the threat palpable and menacing. Marco turned fully to Sarah, eyes locking in a way she hadn't seen in years, deep and searching, weighing the past against the present. If I choose you, then I choose to fight, he finally said, defiance igniting in his posture. Are you ready for that? It was a bold acknowledgement, a pact hanging between them, but it was also a declaration of war against a life he had thought he could manage alone. In that moment, a sense of empowerment washed over Sarah. Whatever shadows had loomed over his life, they would not be faced alone. The men advanced, mocking, the tension mounting as adrenaline surged within her. Sarah's heart raced, racing toward an impending confrontation not just with the intruders but with the battle that lay before Marco and the ultimate question of who he really was beneath it all. As the first blow was exchanged, a spark ignited between them, the air thick with the promise of palpable change. Would this struggle be their breaking point or the threshold leading to something greater? In the chaos, they would discover the unexpected depths of their resilience. What lay ahead was no longer just about survival, it was about transformation. Would Marco stand by her side as they forged a new path, or would his past pull him back into darkness? The commotion erupted like a tempest in the quiet corners of their lives. Marco's fists met flesh, a primal dance ignited by the fears lurking in the shadows of his past. As conflict erupted around them, Sarah's thoughts raced, matching the frantic rhythm of adrenaline coursing through the bar. This wasn't just about self-defense, it was an awakening. Marco was fighting against ghosts that threatened to trip him at every corner. Each blow he dealt seemed to echo a silent battle he had been waging against himself. Sarah knew it was a cathartic release for him, as well as a test of both their wills, her resolve tethered to his, refusing to let him drown in those memories. While veils of anger and desperation clouded the larger man's features, they were underscored by the familiar tick of regret in Marco's eyes. His defenses were disintegrating in real time. Every engagement forced him to confront not only the thugs before him but the consequences of choices he had made from fear and isolation. With every punch, Sarah felt his armor cracking, revealing a complicated man she recognized only through fragments of their past. Yet, as the chaos enveloped them, uncertainty nestled within Sarah's heart. What if they emerged victorious today but remained trapped in the labyrinth of Marco's past? Would this confrontation be a mere distraction or a turning point? The larger man lunged again, and Marco countered effectively, but Sarah could see the flashes of hesitation, the ghosts of previous conflicts. A lifetime grappling with unworthiness flickered behind his composed exterior. She could sense his thoughts swirling, questioning if he was capable of sustaining this fight, of standing up to those who had hurt him so deeply. Together! Marco shouted as he deflected a blow, reaching out to clasp Sarah's hand. That single connection ignited a renewed surge of strength within him. They were bound not just by the instinct to survive but by the unspoken promise to navigate this ordeal side by side. In that moment, as their eyes locked, something profound transpired. Marco found a piece of himself he thought was irretrievably lost, a willingness to embrace vulnerability alongside strength. The struggle became more than a physical battle, it crystallized into a realization, a chance to rewrite his narrative, one that no longer resided in isolation but in this partnership. As the fight progressed, Sarah's focus switched seamlessly. She wasn't just supportive, she was proactive, her movements synchronized with Marco's, a dance of strategy against their adversaries. Each successful counter brought Marco closer to shedding the burdens of his past, and with each jab, she could see him reclaiming his power, reclaiming his identity. The tide began to shift, and the intruders realized they had underestimated the duo. The winds of their fortunes twisted, fear creeping into their ranks as they recognized that the fire in Marco's heart blossomed anew with each passing second. But as they gained the upper hand, Sarah could sense a looming storm. They were navigating a mere fraction of Marco's larger confrontation with himself. The fight outside would mean little if the battle within remained unresolved. Just when it seemed they might land a definitive blow, their manager approached, voice drenched in urgency. "Marco. You're needed back. There's more at stake here than just a fight." Marco's brow furrowed, and a shift settled over him as if a specter re-emerged, casting shadows on the light they had ignited between them. What did this mean for the tangled mess he had previously escaped? As he turned to Sarah, his face was a tumult of determination and doubt, the weight of a past that clawed at his heels transforming into an undeniable force. "I can't run anymore," he breathed, standing on the cusp of a revelation that would redefine his existence. The question now hanging in the air was whether he could embrace the second chance waiting just beyond their immediate peril, or if fear would reclaim its stranglehold, steering him back into the darkness he had fought to escape. In that pivotal moment, both their futures hung in a delicate balance. The choice to face the truth or dismiss it weighed heavily on Marco's shoulders, reinforcing the reality that his journey was only just beginning. Marco's chest heaved as he stepped away from the chaos, the adrenaline still sizzling in his veins, yet the faces of his adversaries faded into the gloom of memory. He glanced at Sarah, her expression a blend of concern and unwavering support, and he felt a warmth igniting something deep within him. For the first time in far too long, he tasted the complexity of hope undercut by the lingering shadows of doubt. "Marco?" Sarah's voice cut through the haze, drawing him back to the moment. She squeezed his hand, the pressure grounding him. It was a reminder of what they had just accomplished together, yet it also stirred something uncomfortable, a confrontation with the truth he had kept buried. "Yeah, I can't go back to hiding. But I'm not sure what's waiting for me." His words lingered in the air, heavy with uncertainty. With a determined nod, Sarah responded, "Then we face it together. Whatever's waiting, whatever you've done, we'll deal with it. But you need to choose. Right now." Marco's heart raced. The gravity of her proposition weighed heavier than the earlier fight. What had been physical now morphed into a psychological battle, an urgency that demanded a decision that could shape not just his future, but theirs as a unit. He wanted to scream, to let loose the emotions he had hoarded away, but instead he held on tighter to Sarah's hand. The manager's warning echoed again in his mind. There's more at stake here than just a fight. And what was that supposed to mean? Had he been running away only to find yet another threat lay in wait? Tracing the cracks of his reality, Marco allowed himself a moment of introspection. The man he had become was forged in the fires of anguish, filled with suppressed rage and paralyzing trepidation. Yet Sarah stood resolute, a beacon in the murkiness. He let her down, not again. "I have to confront them," he declared, realizing the words flowed out as if uttered for the first time. "The past, it won't let me go unless I face it." With a gentle tug, Sarah tilted his chin, forcing him to meet her gaze. "And I'll be right there with you, but only if you let me in. You don't have to shoulder this alone." The challenge was subtle but profound. Could he truly balance this newfound partnership while confronting the specters of his past? What if he faltered? "Marco," her voice softened. "This is about your freedom, not just for you but for both of us. We're partners, remember?" There it was again. The mention of partnership filled the void in his chest, igniting a flicker of something alive and vibrant. He wasn't alone anymore, he had Sarah, and together they were formidable. "I don't know if I can do this without falling apart," he admitted, the fear creeping in. "Then fall apart," she urged, her eyes unwavering. "But fall apart with me right there. You're not just Marco the fighter anymore, you're Marco the survivor. Embrace it." A flicker of realization ignited within him. This was a chance to transcend the very definition he had imposed on himself. Rather than the ghosts that haunted him, he could become the architect of his future. As he took a step forward, the shadows dimmed. The way ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but a sliver of resolve tightened around his heart. The looming confrontation with those from his past would either solidify his newfound identity or shatter it completely. Outside the bar, the night air was brisk and filled with promise, and Marco took a deep breath as he nudged open the door. What waited beyond the threshold loomed large, and his pulse quickened with each step into the unknown. "Marco." Sarah caught his arm, an anchor amidst the torrent of emotions. "Promise me you'll talk to me, don't shut me out." "I promise," he breathed, though doubt lingered. He felt the weight of every decision he had made, but now he carried Sarah's faith with him. As they strode into the darkness ahead, a chilling sense of foreboding nestled deep in his gut. The time had come to face his past, but the question remained, would his determination be enough to confront the very roots of his anguish, or would he fall back into the abyss? The specters awaited, ready to test whether he could withstand the looming collision between his fragile identity and the unforgiving truths of his history. Each step into the night felt like a direct confrontation with the phantoms from Marco's past. The street sprawled ahead, lit only by flickering streetlights, casting elongated shadows that danced like memories he couldn't quite grasp. As he moved forward, he felt Sarah at his side, his steadfast anchor in the swirling chaos of his thoughts. Yet, doubt tugged at him like an unrelenting tide. What am I even walking back into? He questioned silently, each footfall echoing deep within. The echoes of a life he attempted to leave behind loomed in his mind, distorted by fear and regret. Those he once called allies had morphed into adversaries, shrouded now in betrayal and resentment. Marco, Sarah's voice cut through his reverie. You're not just facing them, you're reclaiming yourself, your power. He wanted to believe her. The glimmer of hope she offered flickered like a faulty bulb in his chest. But the apprehension was overwhelming. Could he truly step into the battleground of his history without being consumed by it? Right, reclaiming. The idea felt crammed between his ambitions and the chains of his past. As they approached a derelict warehouse, memories of the night spent plotting, learning, and ultimately falling prey to greed flooded his mind. The dark doorways seemed to beckon him back to nights of violence and utter despair, reminding him of who he had been before and what he had lost. Why did I ever think I could escape? He murmured, almost to himself. And yet, as he stood at the entrance, a shiver tinged with anticipation coursed through him. Something inside began to shift, a realization that, despite the chaos brewing within, there was a light flickering with the possibility of transformation. That he turned to Sarah, who had watched him with unwavering conviction. Whatever happens in there, I won't let it define me. I can't live in that regret anymore. Her smile sparked warmth. Exactly. This is what it means to confront your truth. The past is just the groundwork, you build on it from here. With newfound courage, Marco stepped into the cavernous room. The air heavy with dust and silence wrapped around him, shadows lurked in corners, the air tense with unspoken threats. In the distance, he could make out his former associates, their faces a battleground of recognition and contempt. Silence settled as the room turned its collective gaze towards him, mouths curling in skepticism. These were not just ghosts, they were his reality, the company he had once kept, now his potential executioners. Marco, one of them, stepped forward, a twisted smile playing on his lips. I didn't think you'd have the guts to show up. Thought you were done with this life, huh? I'm not done with anything. Not until I'm ready, Marco shot back, his voice steadier than he felt. Listening closely to the internal chatter, Marco recognized a hardened resolve hinting at a turning point. Had he just articulated the foundation of what could become his power? The more he spoke, the more the voice within him clamored for authority, craving respect he had long denied himself, yet, beneath that burgeoning authority lay the stark contrast of vulnerability. Would they still see the boy that had once cowered before supremacy? Would they allow the survivor to claim his rightful place? I have unfinished business here. And it might involve more than my old debts. In that instant, he felt the weight of his past spin around in a vortex, merging with the vision of who he wanted to become. Marco wasn't just a challenger. Today, he would assert himself as a contender for dominance, an embodiment of resilience and reclaimed ambition, and as he returned their stares, the air thick with resilience, he couldn't shake the whisper in his mind. He had stepped into this confrontation not merely to face his past but to redefine it. As the tension mounted, Marco sensed the delicate balance of fear and determination. The next move would define the boundaries of his leadership, the stakes pulling taut against the upcoming struggle. What if his bravado sparked an unexpected fire? What if the moment ignited more than just rivalry? Facing his past head-on might birth new alliances, or perhaps new treachery, but the lingering question nagged at him. Once unleashed, could he control the darkness waiting to unfold? The warehouse was cloaked in a tense silence as the weight of Marco's presence pulsed through the room, reverberating against the walls laden with memories. Steeling himself, he stepped forward, feeling Sarah's unwavering support anchoring him, solidifying his resolve. The air crackled with the tension of old alliances and ruptured loyalties, and as he stood before the familiar faces, he felt an unfamiliar sense of empowerment surge within him. "I'm here to set things straight," Marco declared, the echo of his voice cutting through the stagnant air. This declaration was not just an assertion of his agency, it was an affirmation of his identity, a resolute stand that reflected his transformation. He was no longer merely a product of his environment, he was rewriting his narrative. The skeptical laughter that followed from the former associate stung, yet it ignited a fire within him. Each sneer reminded him of the chains he sought to break, the role of victim that had burdened him for too long. "You think you can just walk back in after all that time?" one of them spat, venom coating his words. "You belong to us, you always will." Marco's heart raced, the old fears clawing at his consciousness, but then he remembered Sarah's words, he wasn't alone, and he had made a choice to redefine his identity. "No," he replied firmly, shaking off the insidious grip of the past. "I choose who I want to be. I'm done hiding. This time, I'm here for what's mine, to confront the business I've been dragged into, and to take back control." As their faces shifted to surprised frowns, Marco felt Sarah's gaze upon him, a steady reminder that vulnerability did not equate to weakness. It was okay to reveal his ambitions now, he had long ago disentangled himself from their grip, and she believed in his ability to create his path. "What if it's not that simple?" the lead man retorted, his bravado weaved with desperation, a hint of uncertainty masked under an aggressive exterior. Marco advanced another step forward, addressing the entire group. "Fear isn't the only thing that drives someone. Love, loyalty, and ambition can be just as powerful." His resolve crystallized when he spoke, the acknowledgement of Sarah's unwavering support buoying his confidence. The challenge now lay not just in reclaiming what had been his but in redefining his relationships, demanding that those around him recognize the strength forged from struggle. Perhaps for the first time, he realized a choice to obliterate the patterns of his past had also opened a pathway for potential reconciliation, alignment with his truest self rather than an allegiance forged through fear. As the leads exchanged wary glances, Marco seized upon their uncertainty. "If I can change, then so can we. We don't have to continue this cycle. I will forge a new path. Are you in or out?" The silence that encased the room felt electric, laden with the weight of decisions unfolding before him. These individuals had watched him claw his way to this juncture. The boy who had once sunk into criminal despair now stood as a man determined to rise above it. And he had allies in unexpected places. Sarah remained resolute by his side, providing the steady heartbeat that reminded him of what real strength looked like. Finally, murmurs arose among the group. Some nodded slowly, as if awakening to the possibility that perhaps they didn't have to succumb to the chaos that had defined their lives, either. It was a moment of collective recognition. Each member faced the awareness that in order to grow, sometimes one must relinquish their grasp on the past. "One thing I've learned," Marco said, sealing the moment with conviction, "is that we can rise together or we can fall apart alone. I know which path I'm choosing." With those words, the tone shifted as individuals began to step forward, some still dubious, others nodding in cautious agreement. A new ripple of energy coursed through the room, a shared understanding that what lay ahead was fraught with risk but rich with potential. As Marco faced the remnants of his life, he felt the shackles of his past loosen their grip. He was not just reclaiming who he had once been, he was evolving into a leader marked by resilience and authenticity. In that pivotal moment, Sarah stepped closer, her eyes sparkling with hope. The barriers he had once built began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of purpose and partnership. Together, they could deconstruct the legacy that had haunted him and build something anew, something radiant anchored on mutual trust and ambition. That glimmer of light sparked promise on the horizon broader than anything he could envision alone. They would face the impending challenges, not as adversaries but as allies unified under a shared goal. They could shape their futures together, their destinies intertwined beyond the creeping shadows of the past, and Marco felt the walls of doubt crumble as he grasped this newfound clarity. Let us find a way to stay true to ourselves, Marco affirmed, looking at Sarah, gratitude pouring from him. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just liberation from his past but the forging of an identity and a partnership where love could coexist with ambition, with resolve etched deep in his heart. Guided by the love he held for Sarah, Marco felt the stirrings of confidence bring clarity to his path. The dawn of tomorrow held the prospect of uncharted adventures, and for the first time, he was prepared to embrace the unknown with an unwavering spirit, a triumphant reconqueror ready to defy the odds. They proceeded forward, hand in hand, nothing could hold them back. United, the world awaited, ripe with possibilities crafted for those daring enough to seize them. This was their moment. This was the embodiment of their growth, their futures knitted close not with chains of the past, but with threads of promise and steadfast resolve. And so, a new beginning ignited, one where courage and love championed against the odds, and together, they would write the next chapter of their lives with strength that echoed through their hearts. Now, it's your turn. If you've been inspired by a story of transformation, don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now to continue this journey of overcoming. This is the moment to show your support.